Hello everybody, my name is Rodgon. I'm an artist, a teacher, a mentor, and today we are going to be learning something cool together. We are going to be talking about shading and lighting, and it's going to be a topic that is going to help you understand a little bit more about what you're supposed to be thinking about whenever you are putting shadows or anything of the sort on a drawing. So before we start, I want to make sure that you guys are up to date with what we have been doing this week, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did yesterday. Yesterday we did heads. We talked about heads as I just doodled over a whole page, and I explained different aspects of the head that make it worth actually learning. Things that are difficult, like the little bumps, what little things like the cheekbones, and how to actually start thinking of the face in more than one simple way. We also believe we talked about heads the day before as well. Trying to explain to you guys how the process of breaking a head down works and what to do in case you guys are actually running into problems figuring out what the solution is for these things. How to simplify it and how to go down a couple basic levels of detail just to make sure that you guys are actually drawing what you're supposed to, as opposed to drawing things that are just too heavily stylized and you don't really know what you're doing. And then the day before that, we did legs. We explained legs and we talked a little bit about how the connection points work and how they connect to the body, how to actually simplify that, how to learn that. Then we learned a little bit about how they actually connect together and a little bit of how to actually play with exercises that will help you be able to have a little bit more knowledge when it comes down to posing and when it comes down to how your body is placed. And we've been doing that over and over and over for the last, well, we are on episode 63. So that is at least 2 months of entire 1 hour long classes every single day. Yay! So for today, we are going to be tackling the topic of shading. Let me load up the YouTube chat because I always forget to do that. There you go. We have Mr. Red Bixian 12 over on YouTube. How's it going, brother? What? Damn, I missed it when cause I had what? Piles of homework. That's depressing. No, the thing is, all these videos, all videos can be found on YouTube. YouTube. Everything that we teach is there for you guys to go visit again after we are done, or revisit if you guys feel so inclined to actually learn a little bit more about this. So I have a channel with over 250 videos, I think now. And all free for you guys to use, right? To learn from, to get experience from. You know, I do this because I love this. I don't do this because I want to just make money with it or whatever. So it's just there. It's all a lot of knowledge that is just there to help you guys on your struggles. So hope you guys take advantage of that. All right, so shading. So shading, the basic concept of shading involves two different aspects, which involve light that comes from light sources like the sun, lamps. What's my lamp look like? It's like a little Pixar light. And other light sources like, you know, overhead ceiling, like lamps, and reflective things like monitors. Anything that creates a light source is going to create light. Light. There is different types of light depending on the shape of whatever your object is. Your light will be either squarish if your object is square, or it will be more like a cylinder if it's a round source. If it's like a star that's creating a light source in the shape of a really cartoony star, that is the same thing that the light source is lighting up, right? Think about this the same way that you would think shadows. It's just the opposite. So shadows are created with um, the darkness that comes from the light being obstructed. So if you have your light and whatever's obstructed is now creating a shadow, right? So anything that doesn't hit actually would extend all the way over here. So from this object back here, due to the light source being this low, it would be right there. If the light source was a little higher, it would look like a little bit less. Higher, and you would see a lot less shadow. Right? So this is what's happening whenever you are casting shadow. Like the shadows is the dark part that's being cast, but there's two kinds of shadows. These are cast shadows. Okay? Cast shadows are shadows that are cast by the object. Let's say you have like a nose, right? This nose, if the light is hitting from this direction, is going to cast a shadow on your lip. Your chin, same light source, is going to cast a shadow on your neck. That is what is happening here, right? This is a cast shadow. Anything that makes an object, that's also depending on how big the light source is, but this is your cast shadow. If there's a light source, and any shadow that is being projected onto a surface is a cast shadow. Now, what are the other kinds of shadows? The other kinds of shadows are form shadows. Form shadows, am I going to need to adjust this again? I think so. There you go. We're just going to change sides a little. No, I need to adjust this. Oh, it's just the TikTok one I need to adjust. I need to get it out of the way. It's one of those bendy ones. There. Cool. There we go. Alright, so we have that. Ooh, people on YouTube can't see this. Having to manage 3 cameras at once is a little intense. Okay, hold on. Then we have form shadows. Form shadows are the ones that you guys normally associate with shadows. They're the ones that give your shape form, right? Shape shadows or form shadows are the ones that indicate the form of our shape. Now, normally, it's easier to identify a form shadow when it's a circular object, right? Or like a squishy object. Like something with round shapes, it's easier to form shadows around and have them look like that. Normally, when you have a very blocky shape, it's kind of like hard to distinguish if it's gonna be like a form shadow or a shape shadow or a cast shadow, because if something's very angular, right, let's say like a head, like a face, those may be cast shadows if the light is this way, but they also might be form shadows depending on where your light is hitting. So it's also another way to distinguish that, though, is a soft versus a hard approach. So cast shadows are normally very sharp, very sharp. Sharp. And form shadows are very soft. That is the main difference that I normally distinguish only. Now, cast shadows can become soft if the object is very far away from them. Right? If the object distance is very far away, the light source in the shadow dissipates over time. So super sharp, still sharp, getting less sharp, even less, into that. Right? As you go down, you're gradually losing a little bit of that. And eventually it starts getting really fuzzy. So the distance actually makes a difference with cast shadows. But most of the time you can distinguish them very similarly. Now, the farther the light is away from form shadows, it really doesn't affect them at all, but it makes the contrast a little bit less intense. So let's say that we have our light source right here, right? That would create a heavy, heavy, heavy shadow because the light source is so strong. But the farther it is away from it, the light has more space to dissipate the strength, and therefore it goes a little bit lighter. So the distance lightens or takes away the contrast between your form shadows. Try doing this by putting a lamp really, really close to your face. Right? So you have a lamp and see how heavy the shadows are because of it. Right? Normally these like create a shadow here, on top of the nose, on top of the forehead. But try doing that really close and then doing that farther away. You'll see that everything just looks a little bit less contrasty whenever you pull the lamp a little bit farther away from it. So that is something that you guys have to keep in mind whenever you guys are drawing any shadows. There's two different kinds of shadows. So whenever you are actually drawing a character, let me show some more examples of form shadows. Cones. Form shadows are very easy to identify. Normally, if you learn to break down your shapes, use your perspective to tell you where the light is hitting. So if the light is hitting from that direction, that's hitting in the front, that means that my shadows in the back are going to be right here. And that also means that my cast shadows are going to be going in this direction. All because I broke this down really easy. Now, if I started adding little parts to this, like negative spaces and stuff like that, then we can just shade those according to the same guidelines that we just did for our basic shape. Okay, so now let's implement this into a couple different examples so you guys see how it's applied when it's actually drawn. Let's see. Let's just draw a basic shape, basic head, give it some planes, connect it to the neck, but we're not going into an anatomy lesson today, so we will not like go into that today. If you guys want to get a little bit more like understanding of how to draw heads and how to draw all that, go look at a couple videos that I have. There's a 100 heads challenge that we did. That was like a 3-4 hour video of me just explaining how to draw heads. And there's a bunch of different head videos that I have on my YouTube. So you guys can actually just go and learn how to draw heads a lot easier. And not stylized, by the way. Like, I don't necessarily teach you guys how to draw in my style. I teach you guys how to actually understand what you're drawing so you can apply whatever style you guys want to it. Think of me as your foundational teacher. All right. Oh, I wonder who this handsome fella is going to be. He looks quite handsome. With his bald head and his big eyebrows. Oh, is that awesome, wonderful big glasses that I see? Oh, I think they are. Learning how to draw glasses was surprisingly harder than I thought at first. Um, Normally, like how we draw glasses is like, uh, let's go into a side note, post-it note lesson. Drawing glasses. Ta-da! So glasses are actually a lot easier to draw than I used to think. When you're drawing glasses, you're essentially taking your eyeballs and then you're extruding that section a little bit more because they essentially fit right around your eye. Right? So you have to get used to drawing your eye and then visualizing that same shape but bigger. If this is a square, you can visualize a square. Right? Just visualize that same shape but bigger, and then remember that they have depth. Glasses have depth, right? They have depth. There is a depth to it. Like that is, it's not just a line. Even though it does look like a line, I'm thickening the line on one side so that it has depth. This side, I normally draw a really thin line to create the idea of the inside part of the glasses, right? And all these little techniques and stuff like that, they just happen to come to you whenever you're like drawing and you're trying to represent an idea or a concept or something with your pen. Like it's just like straight up go like caveman style, and you're like, how do I draw antelope? Blah, 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 blah. And then you just draw it. But you have to be analytical about your stuff. So over time, if you keep drawing something that doesn't quite look right, go back and see what it is about it. Why is it not looking right? And you'd be surprised how good you get really, really quickly when you do that. Oh, I'm so happy. What about readers? You're right. I've got a couple of glasses characters, and they're okay. So hold on. So readers, like, oh, even easier. Like reading glasses, the ones that like sit really low on your face. Once you find your nose, all you gotta do is just go around your nose. All you got to do is remember that your nose has depth, right? Your nose is not just a line. It's not just this. It's this. Your nose is not just like a little simple check mark. Your simple check mark has to have a basis in actual shape. So whenever you actually learn to do that, glasses become really easy because you just go around your nose bridge, right? Go around your nose bridge and then you create whatever shape you want. So that's how you learn how to draw things, glasses. Learn how to map out your face, learn to draw your eyes, and then expand your eyes to create your glasses. And then connect them. They connect at the top. They connect above the eyes. Like, that is one thing that most people get wrong too. Like, glasses connect up here on top of the nose bridge. Like at the top of the nose bridge. And the top of the nose bridge is roughly a little bit about where the eyes are a little bit higher. So that is where your glasses end up. They don't end up with the glasses right in the middle, like the glasses part in the middle. That would put your eyes like right here. So, that's something to keep in mind. So let's give this some darker lines so we can actually distinguish the cross hatching between the shadows and stuff. So we have an average drawing of a person's head, right? In this case, it's drawing of me because I like drawing my own face. So let's determine where we would have cast shadows and where we would have form shadows for this character. Right now, it's just the line work. I have not added any sort of shadows to this yet. Okay, so the first thing is we got to determine what light source we want to use. Do we want the light source to be coming from this direction, 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 or this direction? I think since we are going to be casting shadows, we need to make this light source be able to cast shadows. So I'm going to direct it from here, from this side, from the front, slightly. Okay, we're going to have Mr. Light Source right here. So this will be like a sun. So all the light will be coming from one direction. Right? As opposed to like a spotlight that would be shining more at a cone type of situation. Right? Versus. So in this case, we're just going to keep it nice and uniform, so it keeps it nice and easy as a simple lesson. I will teach you guys how to determine the shadows when it comes down to cone, like type of lighting. And it's actually really easy. It just involves a little bit of perspective work. So, okay, now that we have this character, let's start playing with our lighting. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to do my cast shadows first. The cast shadows are the harsh shadows that are going to be on my face. So it's kind of part of my line work. So I have to think about this. If a sun is hitting from the front right here, everything that is on the bottom, let's say the chin, the bottom of my ear, the bottom of my nose, all that has to have a little bit of a darker line. So everything that would be cast in shadows is going to get a slightly darker line. Just very slightly. Not so much that it's like barely apparent that it just should be like a nice thick to thin quality to this. If the light source is, this is what's happening right here. This, thick to thin. This could indicate lighting very, very easy within your drawing. This is not technically part of a cast shadow. This is more of an inking technique, but it's something that I like to associate with the cast shadows because it's something that helps me determine where my cast shadows are going to be. The biggest cast shadow in my face is going to be from my head onto my neck. How do you determine that? Well, you take wherever the light source is coming from, and then you hit the edge of whatever you're supposed to. In this case, it's this. So technically, my shadow's gonna go all the way down there because of this little goatee. Same thing with the nose. The nose is gonna be the next object that creates a shadow. That's very apparent. So I'm gonna follow my light source, and I know that my shadow for my nose is gonna be on top of my mustache and going around the side of my face. Now, the next ones that are going to be casting a shadow is my jaw, a little bit about my ears, and then my little earlobes, because these have depth, right? This is like a little cylinder. This is going to cast a slight shadow underneath and underneath. Then I start going outward to where my accessories are. Depending on what type of look I want to create with my design, I would go in and create a very slight drop shadow for my glasses. Very slight, just enough not to take away from like the detail, but just to indicate that there's a little bit of depth. And then if I had a background to this, then this character would be casting what type of shadow? A cast shadow onto whatever surface is in the back. Say like a wall or something. And then just like that, you can start easily building your own scene. Now, that is the first. I like to do cast shadows a lot more than I do to like drawing my form shadows. Whenever I'm doing form shadows, this is when I'm doing rendering. Like this is when I'm actually doing like a finished piece. For me at least, right? So I don't normally go in and shadow my things unless I know that I'm going to be doing like a finished illustration. Now that sounds silly to me, but I can create a lot of depth by just creating line work and creating like just by understanding where shadows are supposed to go and creating thick to thin lines, you can create a ridiculous amount of depth on anything that you draw. So adding shadows sometimes just muddies up the design. Sometimes. Not always. But sometimes it's just not even necessary to add them. But let's explain how I would approach this drawing if I needed to add form shadows to it. If I wanted to add form shadows to this, I'm going to start looking at my basic shapes here, right? I'm going to look at this element right here. This is like a teardrop. How would a teardrop be illuminated by a single light source? Well, it would just probably be something like that, right? Just hitting the light source, you would see a little bit of roundness towards the edge. So that's all I'm going to do. Same thing with my eye. What is my eye? My eye is a sphere that has two little covers on the top and the bottom. That is all an eye is. So how would you light an eye, like a basic shape that's an eye? You would just kind of make that, right? Like a little bit of shading on the side. So all I'm going to do is give a little bit of shading on the side. My eyelid would cast a little bit of a cast shadow. Very little though. And I have to be careful not to add too much of that, especially when I'm drawing with pen, because it just makes it look like a mistake, right? So it really depends on what type of material you guys are using. When it comes down to the side of the face, right? I know that this is my forehead. So my forehead has a curvature. So if I was to shade something with curvature, what would happen? Maybe the side here would be a little soft, like, but then this side is more like a box because it's just a side, like a flat side of my face. So therefore this gets shaded like a box. A nice sharp shadow, which creates a nice soft gradient right here because of the roundness of it, but a sharpness over here because it's flat. Same thing happens right here. You go around your cheekbone, which has roundness to it, and then it comes down to the side of your face that is pretty flat. Your neck has roundness to it, and this comes with understanding a little bit of anatomy, right? This is not just gonna magically like appear easy to do because you listen to a video. This is going to involve you actually, like, if you want to take it to this level, to understanding things to the level that I do, you need to understand a little bit about perspective, a lot about anatomy, and you actually have to enjoy trying to practice it because it's gonna take a while to get used to it. Let's try one more example. Let's do a profile view of someone. We'll do someone with really curly hair. So I can show you guys how hair affects the shadows too. Yeah, if you guys want to learn how to draw faces kind of like me, like the way that I draw, just go watch my videos and just draw with me. I explain every step of the way and show you guys plenty of examples. All right, and let's give her glasses too. All right, so if we're looking at this character, right, and we have the light source, let's say from the top this time. This would involve shadows in places that would be very obvious. When it comes down to the hair would actually cast a deep shadow above the hair, like the body. This would create a nice big cast shadow. In this case, it would probably cover most of the face, most of the upper part of the face. It would also cover the bottom part of the hair. So wherever the hair changes volume, that's where the bottom would be shaded. The bottom of the nose would be obviously shading, and it would cast a deep shadow underneath. The lip would cast a shadow underneath onto the chin, and all this area of the neck would be just like black. because the hair and the head are casting a shadow onto the neck. So all that would be probably black. The form shadows in this would be involving the bottom of the jaw, since this is a round object. Even though it has a flat side underneath where your jaw is connecting to your chin, this little flat section, it's still a round object, right? It still has roundness that goes your cheekbones, and then the bottom of your jaw is actually like that bone is pretty prominent. So this has roundness to it. And that all comes with knowledge of anatomy. Again, like that just comes with understanding that your body, like, you know, it's just a bunch of different shapes like this. Like your jaw is just that, pretty much. That is what your jaw is. So if you start thinking about your jaw like that, all you got to do then is fit a neck underneath these, in between. That is how your neck and your jaw connect. You have your jaw that wraps around your neck, and it casts a shadow onto your neck. So that is what's happening whenever there's a light source that's coming from, let's say, this direction. Neck. Do. All right, so we have a couple people in the chat now. Oh wow, we have a bunch of people. You guys can't. Can you guys see properly? Yeah, you guys can see properly. Shadows on fur. So shadows on a normal object, shadows on fur. So shadows on fur are mostly going to be a combination of these two types of shadows, right? You're going to have cast shadows all over because each individual hair is casting a shadow depending on where the light source is, right? So that's happening all over. But at the same time, it's a shape. So something that's furry can still have shape, right? So you have to make a combination of texture, and the texture is going to be indicative. The texture that you're drawing is literally you're drawing the shadows. Every time that you draw a little tick, you're drawing the shadow of a part of the fur. Next to that, you should be drawing a highlight of the fur, right? And every single strand that you draw should have a little bit of a shadow, a little bit of a like highlight. So when you're looking at it small, this is what you're looking at. This, but at a minuscule scale, so this space disappears. And this, instead of drawing a line, you're supposed to just draw the actual, like the space, or leave that negative space to make up for this, to represent that. So whenever you're drawing fur, all the little things that you're drawing inside are more so the shadows of your hair than anything else. That is what the darker lines are supposed to represent. So when you're drawing something with a lot of fur, treat this like one, until you start actually putting the texture inside. Let's say that you are drawing like a bear. Can you guys see? Yeah. And the bear is very hairy, So all these little shaggy, like hairy parts, they cast shadows as well. So whenever you're drawing those shadows, draw them shaggy because that's what they're supposed to be. Whenever you have beards and anything like that with anyone, like animals or humans, they cast shadows too. And then from there, it's just a matter of just learning different techniques to create texture with your drawings. That takes a while too, because it takes a lot of dexterity and it takes confidence to be able to like go in there and just confidently be like, I'm gonna draw this like this. It takes a while, but you guys will get there. Full confidence, and you guys will get there. What makes he has one emotion, which is a good one. Plague Doctor, and yet I don't understand how to draw shadows on fur. I love your Google's method on faces. Is like, oh, yeah, that one's actually pretty good. Let's talk a little bit more about the actual lighting, though. Okay, so we've talked about shadows. I think you guys have a decent grasp on shadows. So let's talk a little bit about actual lighting. So with lighting, even though we do have like cast shadows and form shadows, it's kind of the same concept for highlights, but you have sharp highlights and you have illumination, which is just something that lights up your scene. So you have, I guess you can have diffused lighting. Okay, let's talk about the intensity of lights and what happens when you have something intense. So we have something that goes from intense to diffused would be the right term. Oh my god. YouTube, webcam, stop being dumb. Alright, do we have proper... Alright. Okay, so we have, with lighting, we have intense light and we have diffused light. Diffused light means intense is going to be concentrated on a point, and then diffused is going to be spread out light. Okay, so an example of this would be the sun would be diffused lighting. And then a flashlight would be a direct example of intense lighting. It's going to happen very similar to what happens with cast shadows and form shadows. Instead, this is going to be kind of like a cast shadow. And this one's going to be kind of like form shadows. And I say kinda because it's not quite the same, being that it's light and not necessarily the lack of light, but it's all in the same process of learning how to create lighting. So if you start associating these together, you will realize that there's two kinds of light and two kinds of shadows that you guys can play around with at first, and then learn like about like bounce lights and stuff like that later on, once you establish that you understand how lighting actually functions. So an intense light creates a highlight. An intense light creates a highlight. A diffuse light creates mood lighting or creates environmental lighting. Right? So this spreads out and it encompasses everything around it. Now, what happens if there's other objects around here? Let's say that we have another object right here, and we have another object right there for both of these, right? If the light is really sharp, it's going to be coming from like this direction right here for this one. Let's say the same for this one. Since the light is so intense here, it would actually just bleed out as a little bit of rim lighting to the other things. As opposed to something like the sun that would just illuminate everything the same because it's all coming from a light source that's so big that it's just creating the same pattern for everything. So that is essentially the two differences between that. So whenever you're drawing a highlight, let's say on an eye, can everybody see? Let's say you're making a highlight on an eye. Before you start drawing circles and shapes and ovals and stuff like that, before you start going in and stylizing it, think about your light source. Think about what your light source is going to, where it's going to hit, where it's coming from. If your shadows are illuminating your character, let's say from the top, so your shadows would be cast right there, right? So therefore, shadows would be cast on your eyelids. If light is coming from this direction and your eyebrows are casting a shadow onto your eyelids, then your eyelids would cast a little bit of a shadow onto your actual eyeball. The bottom of your eye would have a little bit of roundness to it because your eye is essentially a sphere with two little hemispheres going around it. And how would you light a sphere? You're doing the same thing here. Basic shape, just basic shape with things cut out. Now, depending on what light source you have, let's say you just have like a house light, like or like, I don't know, you're going past like I don't know, like maybe you're in a classroom and those big cylindrical lights, right? Are in the sky. So just draw a little cylindrical light. And that's your highlight. If you want to have a very stylized approach to it, like for like anime or something like that, what you do is you design your eye however you want it, and then decide on where the light is going to be, mark the light, let's say the light is here, mark it, and then stylize that highlight however the hell you want, but make sure that it's coming from the right direction. So you just essentially grab the actual light and then replace it with whatever style you want. And if you want to really go crazy and like do like some really chibi ones or whatever, just start changing your highlights to things like stars and like little tiny things that just will be appealing. Stylize your design a little bit. But at the end of the day, you're not just stylizing for style's sake. You're stylizing with the knowledge that you understand what you're drawing. And that applies to every single type of eye that you draw, realistic, cartoony, whatever. The same concept applies. Highlights are just intense light that is hitting. Sometimes you don't even get a highlight. Another thing that intensifies highlight is if something's wet. If something is wet, intensifying the highlight will make it look like it's wet. So intense highlights are good on wet materials or plasticky materials. Because if you give something a big highlight, it's just going to look like it's plastic. It's probably not a great example. So ta-da! So that is probably going to be our lesson for today, guys. So thank you so much for keeping up with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you guys learned a little bit more about lighting and a little bit more about what it takes for you guys to actually understand lights. Instead of just throwing shadows into your drawings, learn to understand different concepts behind it so that you guys can actually make awesome drawings with informed knowledge basing everything behind it instead of just a style based knowledge base, right? Which is fine if that's your approach, but remember that if you do approach your career like that, it's going to come to a conclusion a lot earlier than the other people because you won't know how to proceed when it comes down to when you don't have anybody to learn from anymore. So it's going to hinder you down the line to just learn on a style-based basis, learn on a form-based basis with foundations in mind so that you guys can actually be able to proceed throughout your careers without being hindered in the slightest. Now, if you guys do want to support, Little Rod has a little bit of an announcement for you. Hi, everybody. Mini Rod here. If you guys want to support Big Rod over here and what he does, you guys have a couple ways to go about it. You guys can go and purchase his books down through his links in his Instagram, TikTok, and I believe YouTube too. But if you guys want, those are books filled with awesome drawings. Not just like these, but girls and coffee break doodles and ways to break your art block. And on top of everything, you guys get a free activity book if you guys just go to the links. So either way, you guys get something cool. Yay! So if you guys want to support, that is the best way to go about it. And if you guys do feel inclined to subscribe to my YouTube channel, I want to get to the 100K followers there so that I can get my plaque. I deserve the plaque. The plaque! So that is the way you guys can help. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys learned a little bit. I want you guys to draw a little, smile a little, laugh a little, and enjoy life a little. Okay? Talk to you guys soon, and